On the surface, Quake2Jump might seem like an outdated version of Quake 3 Defrag, that it's more or less the same thing, just on a more older and less developed engine. But there are actually a lot of unique mechanics and technicalities that changes the gameplay experience quite drastically. In Defrag you see a lot of maps tend to focus on speed and mobility, but in Quake 2 you typically have more slower parkour type trick jump maps, and that's mostly due to the movement mechanics that makes it fun. I'm assuming you already know how to strafe jump, and that's why this video will focus on Quake 2 specific tips and information. We will start with the more generally known mechanics, and then I'll shift to talking about nuances that you will need to know that you probably didn't know existed. In Quake 2, the jump height is additive. By chaining multiple jumps in row, you will be able to reach higher than you would with the velocity of a single jump. The way it works is simple. If you're going up vertically and you proceed by adding another jump, it just adds to your vertical speed. The faster your jump interval is, the higher combined speed you get. This is the basis for Quake 2 double jumps, or how the additive vertical speed works. Ramp jumps are very simple. When you jump off them towards the uphill direction, you will get higher jumps. The faster you hit them, the higher you fly. When you hit ramps in Quake 2, you kinda just slide them up without losing any speed. It doesn't seem to make a difference how you land on them, and I mean like whether you were moving up right after a jump or if you were falling. However, landing on the very bottom part of the ramp seems to throw you higher than if you landed on the top part of the ramp. And as far as I know, you can't really double jump from ramps, unless maybe if you're moving slow enough to be able to walk on them. If you jump from a ramp to the downhill direction, this time you get a horizontal boost instead. The faster you fall, the higher the boost. There are floor surfaces in Quake 2 that have less friction than regular floors. You can use these floors to accelerate faster and make sharper turns without losing speed. It's kinda like crouch sliding in Quake 4, but with steroids. If you've ever played CPM physics in Defrag, the slick behavior there is quite similar. Ladder jumps follow the same principle that double jumps have. If there's a physical ledge on the top part of the ladder, you can use your ladder climbing speed and combine it with your jump velocity. Simple in theory, but the timing can be pretty annoying to getting used to. Water jumps? Similar to ladder jumps, but this time you're using the speed you get from coming out of the water, and then you combine that with your jump velocity, if there's a ledge that you can jump off. Some maps don't even need the additional jump, and it's enough if you just flop out like a dolphin. Okay, that's all the basics. Now here's some alien stuff. Point zero suction. Point zero, also known as the origin point, is a three-dimensional coordinate that every Quake map has. 0 units to the Y, X and Z directions. If you've ever played Quake 2 on a very high FPS, you may have noticed that it's really hard to walk in a perfectly straight line, and walking just feels weird for some reason. That's because your character is always drawn towards the origin point of the map. This happens because your positional coordinates gets rounded each frame, and it's always rounded towards the direction of the origin point. Simple way to visualize it is that you're always pulled towards it, as if it was a black hole, and the pull is stronger the higher your FPS rate is. Knowing the direction of the origin point can be crucial, because this affects your movement in different ways. You don't have to know the exact coordinates, and it doesn't matter how far away you are from it. You just have to know which way it is and whether you are above or below it. One easy way to check where the direction is to just rapidly strafe left and right on the ground, and you will see yourself leaning towards the origin point. To see whether you're below or above, just write this in the console, and the third value here, if it's in the negatives, that means you're below, and in the positives or whatever means you're above it. When you're running towards the direction of the origin point, you accelerate slightly faster than you would if you went to the opposite direction. If you're below the origin point, you will also be able to jump a little bit higher than if you were above it. As it so happens, the entire map of Q2DM1, the edge, is actually above the origin point. This is why you can't reach on top of large crates, despite being able to do it in other maps like Q2DM8, the warehouse. Movement behavior in Quake 2 correlates with your frame rate, and there are various movement tricks that becomes more consistent and dependable when you cap your frame rate to specific values. So this is something you have to take into account when you're optimizing your jumping. First thing to figure out is how you want to render your game. If your CL async value is at 1, this means that your screen will render standard frame rate despite your physics being bound to lower FPS rates, such as 20 or 26. Generally, this is better for streaming, making movies, and if you just prefer to run your game smoother. If your CL async value is at 0, this means you will experience the real stutter of low frame rates. This probably has more appeal to old school players. Maybe the experience becomes more authentic or something, I don't really know. I've seen people preferring it one way or the other. There's not much of a difference in terms of optimal frame rates, but I've marked them in this list that I'm about to show you. You might want to take notes and write these up for reference later. 120 is good for ice and ramp jumps. Also, if you're below the origin point, this will allow you to jump a little bit higher. If your async value is at 1, use 110 FPS instead. 66 FPS is the standard value used for normal strafe jumping, and you can also use it for speedy double jumps. 27 FPS is great for standing double jumps. Standing in this context means that you're starting the jump sequence either from 0 speed or running. If your async is at 1, use 26 FPS instead. 27-26 can also work for some ladder and water jumps. 22 FPS is great for standing triple jumps or multi-jumps. These 4 are the most essential and commonly used frame rate values. I recommend making binds for each of these. Now we're gonna go through some more specific ones that aren't really used that often, but might help you in some situations if you get stuck. 90 FPS can also work for strafe jumping in some situations. If you're below the origin point, this might give you a slight edge for reaching longer distances. 34 FPS can help you out with some multi-jumps. 31 FPS is kind of an outdated value that people used with ladder and water jumps. I've never found any use for it, but I'll put it here anyway. If for some reason you want to do double jumps but don't want to fly as high, 20 FPS can help you with that. This can be useful if there's an obstacle on the ceiling that you would bump your head into with regular double jump height. You may have noticed that there were a lot of maybes and ifs in my explanation there, and that's because sometimes there are multiple solutions for different obstacles. Sometimes you're doing multi-jumps with 22 FPS, but then you might realize that you need to switch to 66 FPS in between those jumps. You don't always have the correct definitive answer for every issue. And sometimes none of us know what the fuck to do, what's the best way. So it's a good thing to try and experiment with these yourself. I know it's probably very overwhelming to try and think about different binds for different types of jumps. The way I got used to them myself was to just pretend that I'm switching weapons. So basically I just got my binds assigned to different weapon slots that I would use in normal arena shooter gameplay. Alright, that's all for today. This should get you started with Q2Jump. I'd like to thank everyone in the Q2Jump community for helping me put this video together and still making awesome maps even to this day. If you wanna know how to set up Q2Jump, where to get maps and where to play, I recommend joining the Q2Jump Discord server. I'm sure you can also find answers and help from there as well. You can find the invite link in the video description. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching. Bye.